Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Alchemy's monthly client presentation, where I bring in the most amazing guests ever. And today I am super excited to introduce you to Nikki Rausch, who is a dear, dear friend of mine, long-standing business bestie, and incredible sales expert. So a lot of times when I'm working with my clients, or our bookkeepers are working with clients, our team members, they'll share with us their goals. And usually it's an increase in revenue. And so we go, okay, that's awesome. Noted. And then when we're looking at the financial results, and maybe they're a little off from the goal, or maybe quite far off from the goal, will be like, so what's going on with the goal? Well, things aren't going like I had imagined. And they think it's a strategy thing. Like they think it's like I need a new product or a service, or a change my price point, or a new piece of technology. And that may be true, but more often than not, I find that what actually needs to be looked at is their sales process and how they're handling sales conversations. And so that's where I feel it's so valuable to get feedback and support from an expert in the sales realm. And my go-to person is Nikki, so I want to share her with our community. So today's call is recorded, so you will get a copy of the recording, and feel free to take any notes that you like. And if you're attending from the recording, like you're not live, do not hesitate to reach out with any questions along the way. So I'm going to hand this over to Nikki to jump in and get started, introduce herself, and all that. I'm going to mute myself. If you have questions, you can put them in the chat. I will monitor the chat because I know Nikki doesn't, when she's teaching, she's not super attentive to the chat because she's really focused on what she's teaching. So I'll monitor the chat, and if there's something that we need to pause for, I'll ask her to pause and we can deal with that. Please ask questions along the way. Don't wait till the end because sometimes you forget. But if Nikki's going to cover something a little bit further on, she'll let you know that, and we'll be sure to answer everybody's questions. Take it away, my friend.
All right. Well, thank you. Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for taking this time and allowing me to be here with you today. And the goal is that when you leave here after this presentation, after the questions that you have and get answered, that you will be able to immediately implement at least one of the things that we're going to talk about, and you will see a change in the way people respond to you. So this is really what we're going to focus on today, is sales strategies to change the game for your business. So the main kind of overarching concepts here is I'm going to break down the 5 steps to mastering a sales conversation. I'm going to talk about the importance of issuing invitations. We'll also go into what I think is one of the most powerful sections that people often get big ahas from, which is the difference between talking at or talking with examples. This will all make sense as we dig in. I'm going to give you some techniques around creating curiosity, and then we'll move to pre-framing and next steps. And I know that doesn't really mean anything yet, but what I've really done is I've pulled out some of the main components of a multitude of things that I teach. I've like cherry picked the best things that can immediately make a difference in your sales conversation. So that's where we're going. A little bit about me. If we are just meeting for the first time, I do show up with over 25 years of sales experience. I had a lot of success in my corporate career. And in addition to my sales experience, I have over 200 classroom hours in studying neurolinguistic programming. And if that's a new term to anybody on the call, it's really the study of communication. So neuro, the way you process information in your brain. Linguistics is the language piece, which is really my specialty. And then programming is about habits and patterns. So I have tested and tried all of the things that I'm going to share with you today. I've used them in my corporate career and had a lot of success with them. I've taught now thousands of people how to use these in their own businesses and seen results. So I will only give you things that I will do myself, and I'll only encourage you to do things that I know work. So that's me. I am often a guest expert on podcasts. I have actually been featured on over 350 podcasts, and I have written 3 books, and I have my own podcast, which is the Sales Maven podcast. So that's me. And I work with clients in a couple different ways. I do work one on one. I do group coaching calls. I have a group coaching program, and then I do team trainings. And then every once in a while, I do a one off workshop and things like that. But mostly how I work with my clients is one-on-one or in a group setting. So I have developed a signature framework for a sales conversation. So I mentioned that the language piece of the NLP is really my jam. So I have developed my signature framework for how to have a successful sales conversation. And I call it the selling staircase. It's broken into 5 steps. And the reason I teach it as a staircase is because most people understand that you ascend a staircase one step at a time. And unfortunately, when people find themselves in sales conversations, they often make a huge mistake, which is they try to skip steps. And my guess is anybody on this call today who's ever had anybody try to sell to them have probably experienced this, where somebody, you just meet them for the first time and they immediately go in for that sale, right? And sometimes they don't even like give you a hi or a hello. They show up in your inbox. They show up, at networking events. They approach you in all different kinds of ways, DM you, and you're like, who are you? Why are you contacting me? So one of the things you don't ever want to do in a sales conversation is try to skip steps. So I'm going to break down the steps for you. And as I go through these, if you recognize that there's a step that you're thinking, I think I might be skipping that, you might find that when you incorporate more of that into your sales conversations, you'll find that they run more smoothly. They're easier for your prospect to be in conversation with you, and it's easier for you to guide the conversation to where you get to the place where you exchange dollars for services or product, depending on what you're selling. So your job as the seller is to not skip steps. The only exception to skipping steps is if one of your clients or a prospect shows up and they show up on a higher step, right? Like they might not show up on step 1, which is introduction. They might show up on step 3, which is discovery. You don't have to like say, slow your roll. We got to go back to step 1. You start with them where they are and then you progress. If you show up in a conversation and you immediately go in for the sale, this is often where people get a little bit confused or sometimes frustrated or frankly sometimes annoyed with you. So if you're getting that kind of response from people, it's a good indication that you're skipping steps, and it's time to do something different. So let me break down the 5 steps for you. And again, this is if you're recognizing like, I think I'm not really paying attention to that step. Chances are we're going to talk a little bit about it today, and I'm happy to go into deeper questions during the Q&A section too. But here is step 1 in a successful sales conversation is it starts with the introduction. And the objective here is to make a powerful first impression. I'm sure, hopefully you've probably heard, people make a lot of judgments when you meet somebody for the first time. They say within the first 10 seconds of somebody meeting you, they've already made up to 10 judgments. Now you might be thinking, yes, but I'm an evolved human and I don't judge. Congratulations. I love that for you. Everybody else does, all of your prospects do. So be aware of it and then ask yourself, when somebody is meeting you for the first time, how are you showing up in the conversation? Are you making a powerful first impression? Or are there some things that you might want to change or tweak a little bit? Because people are making that, they're getting that first impression. It's very hard to change somebody's first impression of you. So we want to do everything we can to set ourselves up for success. Now, sometimes first impressions are made through your website, or they're made because somebody sees a video of you on social media, or because they hear you on a podcast, or they walk by your booth at a trade show. All these things, first impressions are happening. So what are the pieces of it that are within your control? And if you haven't ever taken a step back and asked yourself, what kind of first impression am I making online, in person, in a video call, at a networking group? And just have a little evaluation, a little self-evaluation, and ask yourself, is there anything I could do to improve the chances of making a positive first impression? So once you do make a good first impression, usually what happens next is step two, and that's creating curiosity. This is the most missed step in a sales conversation. And yet it's one of the most important, because if you don't do it, it's very hard to get any further on the staircase and actually earn somebody's business. So we have to be able to create curiosity, because when you create curiosity in the mind of a prospective buyer, it gets them wanting to engage. It gets them wanting to know more and ask questions. And that's usually where you can earn their business. When you create curiosity, the most likely thing that happens next is people start to give you buying signals. Now, buying signals are verbal and nonverbal cues that people give that indicate interest. We have to be able to create curiosity, because people don't know what you know. When they're just meeting you for the first time or seeing you online, they don't know what's possible for them yet. And if you don't create curiosity, they might just move on. They might just keep scrolling. They might just walk by you at a trade show. They might just not choose to like dig deeper into your website or whatever that is. So we have to be able to create curiosity to get people to lean in, to want to know more. Now, once you create curiosity, and I'm going to do a little bit of a deeper dive on that, by the way, it's coming, is you move them to step three in the sales conversation. I call this discovery. Oftentimes people label this as their consult call or that get to know each other call, or I don't actually care what you call it. I care what you do during it. And during a discovery call, when you're talking to somebody who you think is a prospective client, your job here is to ask really smart questions that plants the seed in the mind of the prospective buyer. Oh, I'm talking to somebody who can solve a problem for me, or I'm talking to somebody who knows something that I want to know. So it gets them wanting to continue that conversation. So when you are in discovery, this is when you are finding out what's going on for this client, what's their problem, what's their struggle, what's their need. And by asking really smart questions, you establish yourself as the expert and the go-to person for them to hire. Now, once you do a well done discovery, you move to proposal. Proposal is actually where selling happens. So we already went through we're on step four of a 5-step process. And notice here, I haven't talked about selling yet. You actually aren't selling until you get to the proposal. You're building relationship. You're finding out what's going on for people. You're asking really smart questions. All these things lead to where you can actually put a proposal in front of somebody. Now, depending on the type of business you have, a proposal may actually be a formal proposal for some people. For some of you on this call, it may just be a conversation, and whatever it is, it's fine. But the objective in the proposal is to make a recommendation and clearly lay out what is the right solution to meet their needs. You're the expert and it's your job to do that. Don't just say like, we'll go check out our website and see all of our options. No, you make a recommendation and then you follow up with step 5, which is the close. This is the second most missed step in the process. If you get all the way to step 4 and you don't attempt to close, you oftentimes are just leaving money on the table and you're postponing this person getting a solution to the problem or the need that they have. So when you lay out your proposal, you have to issue close language. And then you see on here, I have it, and then zip it. This is often a problem for people who aren't that comfortable selling. They get nervous, like not talking. And yet, when you get to the proposal, you've laid it out and then you issue close language. You have to wait and allow for that person to make a decision. Do they want to move forward or not? Or do they have an objection? Or do they have a question? We have to give them that opportunity to actually close the business. So those are the 5 steps. And in order to successfully move somebody through the sales process, the easiest way to close a sale is to issue invitations every step of the way. So they don't know your prospect, they don't know what your process is. They don't know what they're supposed to be doing. You have to guide that conversation. And the way you do it is oftentimes through an invitation. So let's talk about invitation language and what that looks like. It's usually in the form of a question, because that helps people to know what to do. And it gives them like authority to make decisions, which is really smart. It shows respect in that conversation for them. It needs to be super clear as to what they're supposed to do or say next, because if they're confused, a confused mind does not buy. So we want to make it super clear what they're supposed to do or say next by the way we position the question. Oftentimes, the questions can be answered with a yes or no. However, it's one of those great invitation questions often get people to take action. Even though they could just say yes or they could just say no, they often take action as a result. Now, as I show you some invitation language, this will probably make sense to you. But one of the ways I'll take this out of a sales context, I don't know if you've ever been at home and you've heard the doorbell, but you don't actually want to go answer the door. So you turn to the other person that's at home with you and you say, did the doorbell just ring? Now, you know the doorbell rang, right? But what do? They get up and go check to see who's at the door. So you don't have to, right? This is what's so great about invitation language. It often causes people to take action. That's what we're going for. And sometimes these invitation languages come across as asking permission, which is a good thing because if you don't have permission to sell to somebody, frankly, you shouldn't be selling to them. So, invitation language examples. I'm going to give you a few here and see if you are using any of these yet. And if not, if you like one of the ones that I show, grab it, put it in your back pocket, and be ready to use it to move people along the process with you to earn their business. Would you be interested to learn more about? Very different than just saying to somebody, you know what you should be looking at is my XYZ product or my XYZ solution. People are like, why should I do that? But if you say, would you be interested to learn more about? It's an invitation. And oftentimes they're like, yeah, tell me about it. Here's another one. Should we schedule a time to chat more about this? Super easy question, right? It's an easy yes or no, but oftentimes what it leads to is you actually scheduling an appointment to have a conversation to earn this person's business. Here's another one. Are you ready to get started now? Pretty direct question. But yet, if you're not asking these types of questions, oftentimes people aren't making these types of decisions. So if you are talking to a buyer or a prospect and you're not helping them make that buying decision, oftentimes they won't. And they won't not because they don't want to work with you, but because they're overwhelmed with decisions. We have decision fatigue. It's a real thing in our society. And so if people are overwhelmed and they don't have to make a decision, oftentimes they won't. But if you make it easy for them to make a decision, they're much more likely to like take that next step and actually you get to exchange money for services or product, whatever you're selling. Now, here's one that is about moving somebody into a next step. This is a permission type question. Based on what you've shared, you'd be an ideal candidate for XYZ, whatever you insert here. Is that something you'd like to learn more about? Now, notice here, I don't say you'd be an ideal candidate for XYZ. Here's all the feeds and speeds about XYZ. Here's the price for XYZ. Do you want to buy XYZ? No. I wait and I ask permission to see if they're interested in hearing about it before I launch into talking about it. Because if I miss this permission step, they might shut down. They might be like, I'm overwhelmed. We need to know if they're ready to hear about something before we put it in front of them. All right. Here's my little secret for you. Most people will not buy from you until you invite them. You can also put ask here. But if you're not inviting people to take next steps with you and like move through the process, oftentimes they won't. Now, I mentioned this idea of decision fatigue. You might be thinking like, yeah, I think I might have that. Most of us do. I don't know if you've heard this statistic. If you've heard me speak before, you probably have because I talk about it a lot. But they say the average adult makes a certain number of decisions every single day. Anybody who's willing to put in the chat, think about how many decisions on average you make a day. What do you think that number is? Get a number in your head. If you're willing to put it in the chat, that'd be awesome. If you just want to get it in your head, that's fine too. I'm going to give you a second to throw in an answer. How many decisions on average do you think you make a day? 100? Anybody else have a guess? Andrea? Okay. 150. Corey, 5,000. Deepak, 10. Okay. William, 350. Okay. They say that the average adult makes 30 to 60,000 decisions a day. Isn't that crazy? 30 to 60,000. So if you're not putting decisions in front of people, and super easy, like, here's the next step, here's the next step, and inviting them, oftentimes they won't. Not because they don't want to work with you, because they're overwhelmed and they have so many other things to do. And if you think they're going to decide to hire you later, you're putting yourself at the bottom of the next round of decisions that they've got coming their way. So if you don't invite them to work with you, if you don't invite them to take the next step, and you just say like, hey, call me when you're ready, what are the chances you're ever going to be moved to the top of their decision to like hire you that day if they've already got 30,000 other decisions to make? Pretty slim chances. So we got to get them in the moment when they're actually engaged in a conversation and make it super easy for them to take next steps and make that decision. And when you've got them on the call, when you're in a live conversation, when you're actually engaging with somebody, that's the easiest time for them. And if you want to earn people's business, you got to make it easy. All right, we're going to switch gears here, and I'm going to move to another section, which is the difference between talking at and talking with. So oftentimes, I often say with sales that you shouldn't be talking at people, you should be talking with. Sales isn't something you do to another person, it's something you do with another person. So I'm going to show you some language examples. These are really common. So by the way, as I show these to you, if you're like, oh, I say that all the time, or oh, I write that all the time in my messages, please don't beat yourself up. Just look at what I give you as an alternative and decide, are you willing to try this different type of language to see if it gets you better results? So here's the first one. You have to stop talking at people because they stop listening. We get talked at all day long, right? And we're bombarded with all kinds of messages. If you really want to engage with somebody, you have to stop using this phrase, let me know. Let me know when you're available. Let me know when your decision is made. Let me know if you'd like to talk further about working together. Let me know is essentially saying to somebody like, hey, you're busy. You have 30,000, 60,000 decisions to make today. Just add this to your to-do list and then like, let me know because I want to make it easy for you. That's not making it easy for somebody. That's just adding to their to-do list. And they say most of us die with our to-do list undone. So we have to make it super easy. So you got to get this let me know garbage out of your language and instead ask questions. Are you available to meet next week? Have you made a decision? Would you be open to learning more about XYZ? If you're not asking these types of questions and you're doing these let me know, which by the way, again, this is super common language in society. And I think a lot of times people think, well, I'm just being really respectful of their time and attention. But in actuality, you're just adding to their to-do list, which isn't respectful of their time and attention. So make it easy in the moment and ask questions instead of let me know statements. That's talking at. Asking questions is talking with. Okay, here's another one. When you talk to everyone, you talk to no one. And yet many of us do this on social media. We do it in our email communication. We send messages like, hey, everyone, or hey, you're all invited, or you're all going to want to know about XYZ. Now, I know most of you don't have your cameras on. So, but just I want to ask you, how many of you sit around in a group and actually read emails together as a group? Anybody sit with their coworkers or their friends or family and read emails together? Like, hey, let's look at my inbox. Let's read it. Nobody, right? So when you're sending a message to somebody, you have to talk to the person, the reader, not readers. Because when you talk to everybody, it feels impersonal. It's like, well, that message isn't for me. That's for everybody else. So here's the way you can change up your messaging. Hey, insert their name, or you are invited. I don't care if you're sending the same, blast email to 10,000 people on your list or 100,000 people on your list. You still write it to the reader, not readers, because nobody reads email as a group. Or is this something you'd want to know more about? Or is this something you'd want to take action on? So start writing your messages to individual readers, and you'll find that people are more likely to engage. How I measure my success is when I send out messages that are to my whole list and people respond as if it's a personal message from me to them, then I'm like, okay, I hit the mark there. Versus them going like, not for me, delete. Okay, here's another one. Conversations happen when questions are present. So here's a phrase, if I could get this out of the way that we talk and write, I would love to get this one out. Telling people what you know about them oftentimes triggers a polarity response. A polarity response is you say yes, the other person goes no. You say true, they go false. You say black, they say white. It triggers this like, you don't know me kind of response. So when you write messages like, I know what you're thinking, people will be like, no, you don't. So it creates this like contrary response. That's not what we're going for. Or I know you know this, or I know you're considering. You don't need to use this language. Instead, ask a question. Is this something you'd agree with? Have you heard this? Is this something you're considering? It shows respect to the other person. And by asking a question, you trigger their brain to want to answer. It's natural, like in our brains are like Google. If you go to Google right now and you type in anything, Google is trying to give you an answer. Our brains are actually wired the same way. If you ask somebody a question, there's actually a technique. I can't think of what it is off the top of my head right now. There is an actual term for this. Your brain, when somebody asks you a question, your brain has to intentionally try to not answer it. Like you have to try to think of something else because we are wired to answer questions. So when you ask somebody a question, they're more likely to engage with you versus you telling them and talking at them. All right, this is the last one before we move to the next section. People are often more interested in themselves than they are in you. This is like that hard fact, like we all think the whole world revolves around us, right? Everything that's happening is happening for you, to you, or against you, right? My example I often give here is, I don't know if you've ever found that you are like in a hurry to get somewhere and yet there's all this traffic on the road in front of you and you're feeling like annoyed, like, where are all these people going? Like, why are they out on a Monday? Shouldn't they be at work? Like, why are they in my way? But we don't actually think about all the people behind us that are thinking the same thing. Like you're thinking about the people in front of you as traffic, but all the people behind you are thinking about you as traffic, right? So we really are always thinking about ourselves. Your prospects are the same. They're thinking about themselves. So if you want to engage them, the messaging has to be for their benefit. It has to be interesting to them. So instead of telling people what you want for them, like, hey, I want to talk to you about this, not interesting to people. Or I want to tell you, I want to let you know, that's all about you. If you want to engage, you have to get it to be about them. Would you be open to? Would you consider? Would you be interested to know? That's much more interesting to somebody because now it's about them. All right, I promised that we were going to talk more about creating curiosity because it is the most missed step in the sales conversation. Now, I have a whole module. I teach and talk about curiosity a lot. I'm going to give you one piece to get you started so you can immediately start building what I call your like curiosity creating muscle. To build a muscle, you got to work it. So I compare creating curiosity to the difference between how you call a dog and how you call a cat. And I know that might sound a little crazy, so bear with me here. But if you think about do I have any dog lovers in the room, by the way? I know Michelle is. Corey, you are too. Okay, good. So, if you want to get your dog's attention, a lot of times you'll change your voice or you'll change your behavior. You'll do these things like, come here, boy, like you act excited. And dogs love that energy. They're like, oh, something fun's going to go on. They don't even know. They don't know if it's a treat, a walk, or a bath. They have no idea, but they're in because you seem excited. But sometimes when we show up in conversations with prospective clients or people who we think, man, we could really serve this person, or they would be such a great client for, the services that we provide. And you show up with what I call dog calling energy of like, I'm so excited to talk to you. And I've been waiting for this meeting. And people push away. They go like, oh, too much. Comes on too strong. So we don't want to come off with dog calling energy. So flip it. You can't call a dog the same way you call a cat. And I don't know if I have any cat lovers in the room, Okay, Corey, you too. Good. All right. So you know you don't call your dog and your cat the same. A lot of times when you want to call a cat, you do this like, here, kitty, kitty. You got to pique that interest, right? Here, kitty, kitty. And the thing about cats is a lot of times they won't even come to that. They'll just give you a look like, what? Right? They don't even always come. So we have to start thinking about having a little bit more of that catcalling energy to pique somebody's interest, to get them to want to have a conversation, to get them to want to know more. So the first step in creating curiosity is how you answer questions. So the easiest way to start to create curiosity is to tailor your answers to some common questions. And I'm going to show you some examples of that. Your answer to the common question that people are going to ask you should really only be 1 or 2 sentences. Anything more than 3 and you're in dog calling, also I refer to that as word vomiting mode. So I don't know if you've ever asked somebody a question and then 10 minutes later you're thinking to yourself, I'm so sorry I asked this question because they haven't stopped talking for 10 minutes. That's not what we're going for here. We're just trying to peek to see if what we respond with piques somebody's interest and gets them to want to know more. So I'm going to give you 2 examples, and my suggestion to you is to think about what would your answer to this question be? And it's going to be context specific. So I'm teaching it from the standpoint of sales and earning business and talking to prospective clients. You can use this in your personal life too. You're only gonna give your answer to something that you want to talk more about. All right. So here's a first question. How are you? Anybody been asked that today, this week? 18 times, right? Like it's probably one of the questions you answer the most. How are you? It's a common question. And sometimes we might have a common answer. Some people say fine, some people say great, some people say like living the dream, but that doesn't actually create any curiosity necessarily. So could you say an answer with 1 or 2 sentences that might give somebody something to then follow up with a question to you that would get you into a conversation about something you would like to talk about? So from a sales side, needs to be something business related. Here would be my answer today. I might say, oh, I'm great. I just launched a new program called the Implementer Success Circle, and it's filling up with incredible business women. Now, people might be like, okay, fine. But oftentimes, if you give an answer versus like, I'm great and leave it there, or I'm great, how are you? That doesn't engage any conversation. But some answer like this, it gives somebody something to follow up with a question. They might say, what's an implementer success circle? Or like, what is the program about? Now it opens the door for me to talk more about this program. So, what could you say right now to the how are you question that would open that door for people to ask you some questions, some follow-up questions? Here's another one. Somebody might say, how's business? Like, how's business been, right? What's your answer? Is if it's just like, oh, it's been good, or it's been great, or it's a little slow right now, that doesn't open the door to have any conversation. So what could you say? I might say something like, oh, it's fantastic. I just found out my podcast is now in the top 1% globally. Right now, when I say this, and I do this, by the way, this is one of those creating curiosity is something I play with all the time. I use it in my personal life. I use it in my business for sure. Oftentimes now somebody can go like, oh, you have a podcast? What's your podcast about? Or what does that mean, top 1%? It opens the door to talk a little bit about it, or like who listens to your podcast, right? It opens that door. So what could you say right now to either the how are you or how's business question that allows to pique that curiosity? Now, here's my little like disclaimer. If you have your curiosity creating response, what I call the here kitty kitty response to a question, and the other person goes, that's nice. Did you see the game last night? Like, you don't stop people and go like, hey, slow down. Did you hear my curiosity creating response? You're supposed to ask me a question now. No, you just roll with it. You keep the conversation going and you look for another opportunity to create curiosity when somebody asks you another question. So look for opportunities to add just a little bit more to your answers to see, am I talking to a prospective client or not? You know, when I was first starting my business and teaching about this, I practice this all the time. I do it sometimes at Starbucks when I'm ordering a tea. Like that's just like I do it everywhere. And I went to get my teeth cleaned and the hygienist asked me the like, what's new with you? I think she asked. So I gave her my curiosity creating, like, here, kitty, kitty response for the week. I usually come up with like an answer for the week. And she had her hands in my mouth and she's like cleaning my teeth, giving me buying signals. So I didn't walk into my hygienist thinking like, I'm going to earn my hygienist business. She's going to become a client. I was just practicing. I was just building the muscle, right? Turns out she had a side business and she actually did need some help with sales. So you never know who you're talking to, or if the person you're talking to could open the door for your next client. Be willing to create curiosity and play with it. And the better you get at this, the more business conversations you'll start to have. All right.
Nikki,
Yeah.
I just have a quick question.
Okay.
Um, just about the kind of like the how are you? Like, when you're emailing a client or they've emailed you and you're responding or whatever, right? Like, it's like, hey, so I could just be like, hey, Corey, my like go-to like natural thing is like, so how are you? Right. But like, is that something that we should do in like, kind of building that relationship and that, because you talk a lot about building rapport, or is there
Mhm.
like something else? Because it feels kind of fake. Like when I read people emails that say, how are you? I think, yeah, whatever. You don't care how I am.
Well, here's the thing. My suggestion is that when somebody asks you in an email, Michelle, how are you? That you actually answer.
Right. Yeah.
So, the thing is you can always err on the side of, I think this could be a legitimate question, could be fake, but it could be a legitimate question. And why not practice like building my curiosity muscle? So respond with like, thanks for asking, here's how I am right now, or here's what's going on for me right now. And then you like continue on with whatever the context of the email is. But if you do that with prospective clients, if you do that with prospective partners, you'll find actually that they start to feel more connected to you. They feel like, oh, she actually answered the question.
Right.
And I personally don't think you should write something in an email that's inauthentic, right? So if you really don't care how somebody is, don't ask them in an email. I always will err on the side if somebody asks me a question, even if I find the question a little bit offensive, which not as a how are you question, but I remember one time somebody saying to me, like, when I said that I teach people how to have more successful sales conversations, she said to me, why would anybody need help with sales? Now, I could be offended by that question, and I did feel the hair on the back of my neck stand up a little bit, but I decided to just treat it as it was a legitimate question. And so I answered it in an authentic way, not from a defensive place, but from like, this is why people often need help with sales. And she was like, yeah, I could really use some help with that. Like, so I just always err on the side of, if you're asking me a question, I can choose whether or not to answer it, but oftentimes I will answer it to show that I'm paying attention to them. And I just would assume that it's an authentic question, or why would they ask it? Like,
Okay.
give people the benefit of the doubt. That's my suggestion there.
Okay. Thank you.
And if it feels inauthentic for you to write it, don't. If you're
Okay.
like, I don't care how this person is, don't ask.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
To
All right.
just to piggyback off that real quick, would fall into the same category, being like hope all is well or trust all is well, etc.
Well, here's the thing about that. That's a statement. That's talking at somebody instead of talking with. So instead of saying hope all's well, ask, how is everything? Because then you're more likely to get an answer. But if you just, again, now, if you don't care how things are, then you could say hope all is well, because then they don't need to respond to that. But if you want to engage in the conversation, ask them a legitimate question instead of making a statement. So it's really common for people to write like, I hope this email finds you well, or I hope your day is going great. But that's just talking at people. If you just say, how's your day going? That's a legitimate question. See the difference? Test it if you're willing, Corey, test it and see, do people actually respond? My clients, and what Michelle just said to me, I get that all the time. People are like, it feels like it's like a throwaway, or it feels like it's not authentic. But oftentimes when my clients start asking these questions instead of making statements, they'll come back to me and they're like, Nikki, you wouldn't believe how many people respond and answer the question. Yeah, because you're actually asking a question versus everybody else who's making a statement. So people almost, again, our brains are wired to answer questions. And if you want to engage with somebody, you got to ask them questions. All right, discovery call. This is that step 3 in the sales conversation. The objective, the first most important thing that you have to do when you have your consultation call, or what I call the discovery call with somebody, is you have to create safety. And if you're not thinking about creating safety because you're like, why do I have to create safety? I'm kind of nervous about trying to earn their business. You miss the opportunity to actually earn somebody's business, because if they don't feel safe with you, oftentimes they won't tell you how to earn their business. They won't be open to hearing your message, and they will try to end the conversation as fast as possible. So we want to engage people, and that means we have to create safety first and foremost. It sets the tone for the meeting and allows for them to be more open to telling you here's just the facts of how to earn our business. They're much more open to hearing what it is that you offer, and they'll be much more revealing and engaged in the conversation. So this is how you truly can earn somebody's business, is to create safety. Now, I teach creating safety. The number one way to do this is by having a pre-frame at the start of your call. So anytime somebody says to me, I'm not closing my consults at 75% or more, the first question I ask is, are you pre-framing your calls? And the answer is almost always no. And I go, we got to pre-frame your calls. You got to pre-frame at the start of your calls. If you're not pre-framing, you're not creating safety. And if you're not creating safety, it's super hard to earn somebody's business. I'm going to show you an example of a pre-frame. This is my version. You certainly might need to tweak it and adjust it. If you like what you see and you're like, I'm going to use that, by all means, please do. But if you think like, oh, it doesn't really work for us, then, or for our company or for me, then change it, but do it, because it will make a difference in the success of your calls. So here's the start of a pre-frame. It comes in kind of 2 parts. The first part is you say something, you're building rapport. Thank you so much for taking, for your time today. And then you state the purpose. The purpose of our call is to chat about what's going on for you and your organization, and see if what I offer is the right next step. We're scheduled to chat for about, and then you insert amount of time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is. Then you ask this question, does that still work in your schedule? And you wait for them to answer this question. This is so crucial to creating safety. And the reason for this is because most of us are running from one meeting to the next. That's how we live our days. And if somebody is short on time, they're not going to be engaged in the conversation, and they're going to be up in their head thinking about should I tell Michelle that I only have 5 minutes left, or and then they're not really paying attention to the conversation. So we want to get the time thing out of the way and make sure that we still have the allotted amount of time that we've agreed to. And if not, we might need to reschedule, or maybe we just need to shorten the conversation. Either way is fine, but let's make sure that they're engaged for that amount of time. So it sets the stage. That's the first part. And then the second part is, now we have to take the lead in the conversation. And in order to take the lead, we have to ask permission to do so. So the way I frame this is I say, in order for this time to be meaningful and productive for you, may I start with a few quick questions? Because if I just let a prospect take the lead in a sales conversation, they could, tell a bunch of story, eat up all the 20 minutes that we have, and never get to the idea of how to work together. So you want to lead your sales conversations, and you have to ask permission to lead. Because if you just go I'm going to ask you questions, or don't even tell them, I'm just launching into questions, oftentimes that will alienate people. So we want to be careful about doing that. Now, here's a misstep I want to comment on in the discovery. So once we've gotten their permission to ask the questions, the goal here is to find out what's going on for them. Ask really smart questions that establish, do they have a need, and also your expertise. Here's the mistake that people often make, is they ask a question, they get an answer, and they immediately start selling. And then they ask another question, which gives them kind of changes the recommendation. And then they start selling a different option or a different solution. Then they ask another question, and now they bring some other thing into into the conversation. That is a huge mistake. When you are in the discovery section of a sales conversation with a prospective client, your job is to ask all the questions that you need the answers to in order to earn their business. By the way, it's not to ask questions that you need the answers to once they've agreed to hire you. That's different. Your job is to ask and make it clean, keep it clean. I always say, like, if imagine you were really thirsty and I gave you like a beautiful, perfectly, the right temperature for you glass of liquid that would be super satisfying, whatever, when you're really thirsty you crave to drink. And just as you were like taking this, cup and putting it to your lips, I come by and I throw a clump of dirt in it. Are you very excited now to drink that, whatever it is? Or are you thinking like, hey, jerk, you just muddied my drink? Like, we got to not muddy the water. So when you're in discovery, you ask your questions, you do not sell. This is not where you offer solutions. Where you sell is when you invite them to move to the proposal. So I get all the information that I need to earn their business. And then in order to move them to the proposal, I issue the invitation, which you've seen a version of this already. Based on what you shared, I do have a recommendation of how we might work together. Would you be interested in talking through that? Get permission. Then this is where the selling happens. This is when you lay out the solution. This is when you take the information that you gleaned in the discovery and you really make that proposal fit what their criteria is, what's important to them. And you lay out your solution with that recommendation, and then you immediately follow up with close language, which is this something you'd like to get started with? Is this something you would like to get signed up for? Should we schedule your next appointment? Like, I'm just throwing out some close language here for you. So selling happens during proposal. Now, one last piece here before we wrap up this part of the section and I'll open it up to questions is people will often say to you, I need to think about it, right? Like, maybe they're not ready to make a decision on the call. Here is the thing that you absolutely have to do when somebody says they want to think about it, or they want you to put together a proposal, or they want you to send them over information. You have to schedule your next step before you end that call. So here's typically how I might do it. If somebody says I need to think about it, I might say, great, about how much time do you think you'll need? Let's go ahead and schedule a circle back call now. That way I can answer any additional questions that come to mind and we can decide on best next steps for working together. And then I get a time scheduled on my calendar and theirs to keep this ball rolling. Because if I let them off the call and I'm like, hey, I'll just call you next week. I don't know about you, but when people just call you randomly out of the blue and they're not on your schedule, how often do you answer your phone? My answer is never. Corey, was that a zero? Like, not, yeah. Most of us, if you're not on my calendar, it doesn't exist in my world. I live and breathe my calendar all day long. And most of your clients and prospects are the same. So we got to get on their calendar. If you're not scheduling circle back calls, you are keeping people from actually making decisions to hire you. By having a circle back call scheduled, they're much more likely to make a decision. And maybe they make the decision 5 minutes before the call with you. Maybe they make it the day before where they're like, I'm not going to work with this person. So they'll cancel the call. Either way is okay, because at least now we got a decision. So you're not chasing people constantly. Like, if you feel like, oh my gosh, these people are super interested and then they start ghosting me, it's because you're not scheduling circle back calls. So you have to do this piece. All right. So that's everything I said I was going to cover. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I would love to hear your questions now. And I also want to just offer a free gift, because I think when I get to come and speak into a group, I'd love to give something. So if you like this, I'd love to gift you my Closing the Sale ebook. It's super easy, fast read. It's got language suggestions on those last kind of 3 steps. It goes in a little bit deeper on proposal and closing. If you'd like it, you can just grab it by going to yoursalesmaven.com/ebook. Happily gift that to you. And now I'm going to stop sharing my screen because I really want to see and hear your questions.
This is so good, Nikki. I know,
Yep.
like, I've known you for so many years and I've heard you speak on this so many times, but like, I just heard something a little bit differently that helped me think about our sales call process,
Good.
right? Like, the asking questions to earn their business not asking questions to give you what you need to give them a proposal, right? Like when we're doing discovery calls, we're obviously, do you have payroll? Do you have blah, 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 right? Like that's to give them a proposal. That's not questions to earn their business.
Yeah, you got to find out what's the struggle, what's the problem, what are their
Totally.
criteria, what are they looking to solve? Because some of these questions, like, specifically like payroll or their process for payroll and all of that, that's stuff that you get in the intake form, or that's stuff that you have like a getting started, onboarding call with them.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, I would never ask somebody like, do you have an email list? What's the size of it? I will ask those questions once you hire me to help you, sell more. But in the consultation, I'm going to focus those questions on what are the struggles, what are the things that you're looking to solve, and ask those questions that lets you go like, ooh, Nikki can probably help me with this. So you better believe one of the questions I ask is, do you know how to create curiosity when you're talking about your products or service? Because again, I mentioned it's the most missed step. So most people are like, what now? What do you mean create
Right?
curiosity?
Totally.
And that plants the seed of like, oh yes, I probably need to learn how to do this. So that plants the seed. Oh, I'm talking to somebody who knows something that I want to know. So I'm much more likely to choose to work with Nikki versus somebody who's asked me, what's your email list size? How,
Right.
what are your open rates? I don't need to know any of that until you agree to hire me. Then I'm going to ask those questions.
Right. Well, so do you mean like, so we ask the questions to earn their business and then they agree to hire me and I give them a proposal because everything is very individualized, right? And the proposal depends, I'm sure Corey's like this too, right? Like the proposal depends on all the different things that are going on in their books, right?
So yeah, so if you do need those questions to actually put together a proposal to earn their business, then by all means ask them in the consult or in the discovery.
right.
But again, some of these like I don't know if you need to know this, like how many people do you have on your team? Maybe
Yeah, I
that's
don't need that.
but it's probably not. So you wouldn't
Yeah,
ask that question, but maybe it is relevant when you're talking about how much pay like how much payroll are we actually going to be doing, or
totally.
I don't know.
Yeah, I love this. Thank you so much. This is awesome.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Does anybody have any questions for Nikki? We've got a couple minutes.
Yeah, I got one. I don't know if it's a quick answer, but hopefully. Based on my career and I'm an engineer by trade. I definitely do a lot of the telling people because people always come to me for answers or
Yes.
with questions. And also overseeing individuals with North Stream, same kind of thing. So it's like when I'm talking to people, I try to engage my audience based on who I'm talking with. Like, before doing council or news events or guest speaking or open house sessions or things and gearing to it. But with the sales piece and the asking questions or engagement piece, like, do you have not an easy trick, but suggestion on flipping the script or memorizing to flip the script versus who your audience is?
Yeah, so help me, Corey, if I'm not answering your question. But one of the things is, again, like you said, like you're an engineer, you're used to being asked questions, so you're used to answering questions. So one of the things that you might want to check when somebody's asking you a question, in order to make sure that you're giving an answer that is useful to them, you might say, what specifically, and that's our key word here, what specifically are you looking to accomplish? Or what specifically or what prompted this question? Because as an engineer, you know a lot, right? And you could probably talk about a lot of things for a long period of time. But sometimes people will ask a question and you'll make an assumption about why they're asking the question, and then you'll miss the mark in answering it. So, somebody can say, like, tell me what you know about sales, Nikki. Like, I literally could talk for days and have and do, right? But so I want to say, like, what part of sales would be most interesting for you to know? And then what I'll often do is I use a technique called giving a menu. I can't remember if we talked about in the team call, but I'll give a menu, and I don't give a menu because I want them to pick something off of what I'm giving the menu about. I'm just trying to direct their brain to give them an answer quickly. So the reason giving a menu is helpful is think about if you go into a sandwich shop, like most sandwich shops, when you go up, they got a board that hangs like in the back wall, and it's like, here's all of our meats and cheeses and toppings, and then our specialty sandwiches. And you can look at that board and walk up and be like, I know what I'm going to order. And so it speeds up the order process. But if you go into a sandwich shop and they have no board, like you're going to ask like, well, what kind of bread do you have? What are your specialty sandwiches? And if the person behind the counter is like, dude, we're a sandwich shop, what do you think we have? It doesn't build relationship, right? So you got to make it easy for people. So when you ask a question like, what specifically about this prompted this question? Are you looking for information about X, Y, Z, or something else? Like, I'm just trying to get their brain to go, what I really want you to tell me, Nikki, is how to create curiosity. Or what I really want you to show me how to do is how to put together an effective proposal. Because I could be talking about creating curiosity, and what they're really wanting is help with their proposals. Then I've missed the mark. It's a disconnect. I'm not sure if I answered your question, Corey, so help me.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest thing is sometimes people just want to talk or express or on a talk, and I feel I prompt them to give answers, even though it's not necessarily the case.
Okay.
So definitely guiding into almost asking a question of what area of topic or what do you want to know versus just giving them an answer. Yeah, so
Or what would be helpful? Like, are you just looking to talk this through, or are you looking for some advice? Like, and again, I'm kind of giving a menu just by giving those two options. And I'm asking, like, I don't really know what you're looking for, right? Like I had somebody send me a question yesterday, but there wasn't, like, the question was so vague. I had no idea what she was asking of me. She wrote a big long thing saying like, Nikki, I don't know if this is out of context to ask you about, and then she sent an email that like attached an email that a client sent, and I was like, I don't know what the question is. So I just sent back and I said, I'm not sure what you're asking me, what you're looking for here. Would you be willing to be more specific about your question? And then she was like, oh, my question is, should I do this or that? Well, now I can answer that question.
right. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Hey, Deepak. Hi.
You're muted.
Hi, yes, thank you for the session. Actually, it's very, very helpful. Actually, I'm in an industry where I have to master the process, and then at the same time, I have to teach my people to sell and then close the sale. So but I find like I can go into what they are looking for, but when the time comes that I have to close the sale, I feel a struggle right there. I don't know why is that. What is your feedback? What is your suggestion?
Okay, so you've laid out the offer, and then you feel hesitant to actually try to close. Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was later cut off. Yeah.
Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. So you lay out an offer for somebody, or you have a recommendation for them, but then it gets to a place where it's time to close and you're feeling hesitant.
Yes, I feel like I'm not doing my job good. Yeah.
Chances are you're just not asking the question and waiting. Is it, and so let me check in with you. Are you not actually closing because you're not sure how to, or are you not closing because you feel like you don't want to be pushy, or something else?
I think kind of both.
Okay. Here's an analogy I'll give to you. We'll see if you like this one or not. But if you go out to a really nice restaurant and you have a beautiful meal, and at the end of the meal, the waitress comes by and says, can I show you the dessert menu? And you say to yourself, like, I wish, but I'm full, so I'm going to pass tonight, but thank you so much. Like, the waitress doesn't go back into the kitchen and be like, can you believe that guy? Like, I offered him dessert and he totally rejected me. Like, I'm so offended, right? No, because That's their job, is to offer you the dessert menu. Now, if you go out and you have a really beautiful meal and the waitress comes by and she just slides the check onto your table and doesn't offer you dessert, do you feel a little bit like, what happened to our service? Like, we don't even get offered dessert? If you're not closing in those instances, you're kind of acting like the waitress that like slides the menu onto, or slides the bill onto your table and just walks off. Like, you have to ask. And so like, instead of being weird about or feeling uncomfortable about it, it truly is just part of the experience for the buyer to be asked. It's not salesy, it's not weird. If you don't do it, people will make assumptions about why you're not trying to close. They'll make assumptions like, oh, he doesn't think we're the right client, or, oh, he doesn't like us, he doesn't want to work with us, which none of those things are probably even true. It's because you're worried about what they're thinking about you, but they're not thinking about what you're thinking about you. They're thinking about why you didn't offer them to buy from you. So it has to be part of the process. So that's first. How did that land?
That's incredible. Yeah, please keep keep going.
Okay. So then the second thing is, if you're not making it easy for them to make decisions, you also are postponing them getting solutions to whatever they're struggling with or their problem. And because we're bombarded with so many things, that problem could exist for years and they'll never get a solution. Your job is to, I'm assuming, like, you want to make an impact in the world. You want to be of service to people.
Absolutely, yeah.
To be of service, you have to make it easy. And it truly is part of the sales process. So if you're offering somebody a solution, if you're laying out a proposal and you're not closing, you're essentially not actually doing the job, because it is a part of sales. Closing is absolutely a part. And the thing about issuing close language, like, would you like to move forward with this? Or is this something you'd like to get started with? Or should we go ahead and get the contract drawn up for you? What happens by attempting to close is you're going to get one of 5 responses. Okay. You're going to get a yes. Great. We got a new client. You're going to get a question. And I have a coach of mine, and he always says, Nikki, most people are one question away from hiring you. And the piece that I always add to it is, your job is to allow them the opportunity to ask the question, because until they get the question answered, they can't say yes, or they can't move forward. So if you don't close, the question doesn't come up, and therefore they can't decide to hire you. So if you get a question, you answer the question, and then you attempt to close again. So that's the second thing. The third thing is they'll have an objection. If you didn't attempt to close, you never know what their objection is to hiring you. And so you can't overcome an objection that you don't know about. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, the fourth thing is people will decline. Not everybody's going to be a client. And at least by asking the question, the close question, and allowing somebody to decline, it saves you time, energy, mental capacity of not chasing somebody who is never going to buy from you. Because at least now we know, like, we've cleared the field so we can go focus our attention on somebody who's a better fit client. And then the fifth thing that somebody will do when you attempt to close is they'll say, I need to think about it, or I need to talk to my partner, or I need to put this in front of the committee. And that's all okay. And that's why you schedule the circle back call, is you keep the ball rolling. So your job has to include close. And if you're not closing, you're not completing the full like process to make it easy for them to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. That's powerful. Yeah, that's awesome. But the last one, the fifth one is also objection, right?
Not necessarily. Some people truly do have to put something in front of a committee, or they truly do have to, talk to their partner, or maybe some people really do take time to think about things, right? Like, we all process information differently. Some of us are super fast. I think there's the, Michelle, what's it called with the quick start and the, there's the assessment. Do you know what I'm talking about?
It's a Colby A.
Colby. Yeah. So there's a Colby assessment. Some of us are like super fast decision makers. Like, we make decisions really fast. Some people have to think about things in order to make a decision. And this actually speaks to every single person you come into contact with, including yourself, has what's known as a convincer strategy. And a convincer strategy is a certain number of times you have to say no to something before you say yes. And they're all context specific. Like certain parts of your life, your convincer strategy might be like you hear about something one time and you're like, here's my credit card, I'm in. Other parts of your life, you have to kind of hear about something, maybe read about it, maybe do a little bit of research before you're ready to commit. So you don't know necessarily well, you absolutely do not know what your prospective client's convincer strategy is. And oftentimes they don't know this about themselves because most people aren't even aware of convincer strategies. In certain instances of my life, like you have to ask me 3 times to do something before I'll be like, okay, I'm finally going to agree to do this. Other things like you can ask me and I'll immediately say no, like I'm out. But then there's other things where I like, and by the way, you know, Instagram, Facebook, like all ad companies, they know that's about convincer strategy. This is why you might see an ad for something and you might think to yourself, that's the dumbest product I've ever seen. And then you see the ad again and you think, who would use that? And then you see the ad again and you think, I wonder how I would use that. And then you see the ad again and you think, I wonder if I should buy that. And then you see the ad again and you hit buy. That's your convincer strategy. In that particular case, I think that was 5 times you had to hear or see something before you were ready to buy. So sometimes when you get to that part of the conversation and you close and the person says, I need to think about it, you just haven't hit their convincer strategy yet. As long as they'll schedule a circle back call with you, they're still in it. You still have the opportunity to hit their convincer strategy. But if they say like, don't call me, I'll call you, then it might just be a no. And that's okay too, because at least now you're not chasing and wasting time on people who are never going to buy.
So that there is two possibilities, right? The number one possibility is like you said, convincing a strategy. They need more information or more clarity to make a decision to move ahead.
Or time.
Or time, yes, and are they maybe making excuses?
So just like when Michelle asked me earlier about like, I don't know about that how are you question, like, is it authentic? Is it a throwaway? When somebody says I need more time to think about it, I could assume that they're just like giving me the like go kick rocks Nikki response, but I will always err on the side of I'm going to respect that if they're saying it, that that's true. This isn't a blow off. So I'll offer to schedule a circle back call. Now if they say no thank you, then I say bless and release. Like I'm not going to chase people who aren't interested in staying engaged in a conversation. But I will work with I'll go back and forth to earn somebody's business for years as long as they stay in the conversation with me. If they keep like, okay, let's schedule a time to chat in 3 months, I'll do that. If they say call me in 6 months, I'll do that. But if and I'll say let's get it on our calendars. But if they say like, just follow up with me whenever, like chances are I might follow up with them one time, maybe 3 at the most, but then I'm moving on. Like I don't believe in chasing clients. I always say if you chase clients, you're going to turn them into toddlers. If you have a toddler in your life and you say, I'm going to chase you, they don't even know what the game is and they're already running. So don't act like you're going to chase clients because they'll run away.
Okay, perfect. Right. 1 second. A little bit curious about. So when someone says, "Give me a time to think," or I need to ask my husband or my wife, right, or someone, and then if they book a call for next call, or if they are in contact with us, that means there is something a strategy called the conventional strategy. We need to make them clear about what the decision they want to make. If they don't, let's say after that, if they don't answer the call, right, then they are the wrong person to pursue.
Maybe. So I will tend to follow up with people 3 times before I'll like let go. So I'll do a follow up, like just checking in. Have you made a decision? I'll do another follow up, like wanted to make sure you saw this message. Is this something you're still considering? And then my third message is usually I call it the closing the loop. And that's the subject line that I send. Closing the loop, checking in with you one last time to see if this is something you're still considering. Would you let me know one way or the other? You're welcome to reach out to me at any point when you are ready to move forward. And that is my like bless and release.
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Glad
right.
that was useful. So this was awesome. Thanks for hanging in, Deepak. You'll get the recording by email as well. So you know, you can go back and watch this again. But I highly recommend grabbing Nikki's ebook. And she does have a really super awesome membership if you're wanting support for yourself and your team.
Awesome.
Just give her a
Thank you.
little plug there.
Thomas, Michelle, just quick feedback to you. Actually, I read your email and then I know your work. It's very impactful for me personally. Truly, very very impacting.
Oh,
And
good.
this session with Nikki is incredibly simple and eye-opening. Actually, very very insightful. And I feel like this is the thing that in my business and in my life, the missing piece. And I truly appreciate it, and I honor your work actually at my work.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is awesome. Well, now I feel good, Nikki, don't you?
Oh, that's amazing. This is so fun. Thank you so much. Thank you for your
Yeah.
questions. And
Yeah.
Michelle, thank you so much for allowing this opportunity for me to be here with your
Yeah,
group. I appreciate you.
Totally. Awesome. Everybody have a great day.